Uh, Welcome everyone to March General Inland SoCal Housing Collective meeting. Um, we have two guest speakers today that I'm excited to share. I'm excited for what they have to share out. I think that it's really interesting and could benefit our region and our efforts toward, increasing affordable housing and preserving affordable housing in our area. So to get started, I will intro our first speakers. So we have Lara Hermanson from Farmscape and Dan Allen, who is from Farmscape also, who also they'll be sharing a little bit about what they do um, and how they partner with affordable housing groups and so forth. So go ahead, Lara, go ahead and take it. If you guys have questions, feel free to raise your hand or just drop them in the chat and I'll be watching that too.
You bet. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for having me, Melanie. Melanie and I met at Housing California. We had a really interesting conversation. Um, and Farmscape, me and Dan, have been running this business together for over 16 years. And these areas of California that are kind of urban rural interfaces, counties like, and regions like the Inland Empire end up being a really appropriate fit for what we do. And I think you'll see why as we get into this. So, who are we? What is Farmscape? We design, install, and maintain urban farms, community gardens, farm parks, any one of these elements that are on for-profit businesses, nonprofit housing, um, public works, that has an organic food element. We take care of that for people from design all the way through to programming at the very end. And we think that's really important because unlike a lot of landscape architecture firms that start off as designers, we actually started off as farmers. And so we started off as farmers in California. I was in North LA County as a working on a farm right on the Malibu and Ventura County line. And when we started Farmscape and started working in these areas, I was like, well, I got to learn how to install these farms. And then was like, okay, now we need to learn how to design. And so we went at it in a little bit of a different way. And we think that maintenance is one of the most important parts of this process. And the thing that also leads to these projects not being successful in some cases. Maybe you've seen at an affordable housing development, a group of 8 or 12 raised beds that are in the shade off to the side and more or less abandoned and weed covered because that maintenance element wasn't thought of in the beginning. And that's the value that we think we add as well with developers because we factor in that cost of maintenance into the design process and design things appropriately based on that. And I'm going to stop at the end. I'm going to show you basically some information about our design, installation, and maintenance process. And then I'm going to get into some projects. But I'll stop between those two sections for questions. And so while we focus on food production, we don't want to be, so specialized that you have to hire a second landscape architect for the project. So, oh gosh, Kenny Rogers is here. Great. Okay, the party can start. Um, so the in this photo you see here, we have a food garden that's surrounded by a highly stylized, highly specific design project in Brentwood in Southern California. And we use that feedback loop that we get from our maintenance team in order to influence our design process. And the realistic budget that I talked about, using this photo as an example, this is at an affordable housing project in Santa Clara. And when the farm was originally conceived for this project, the city showed just a 1 acre square and said farm. And because Dan and I have been running projects like this for so long, we were able to take that and say, okay, that's going to end up having an operating cost, in the, northwards of $200,000 annually for all the things the city wants to do. Let's get real here and figure out what can the operating budget of an affordable housing project ultimately support in the long term so that this thing is successful, that we can do all the programming initiatives that we want to do with the city as well. And we were able to scale it back with some hard evidence for our partners at the city and with some community stakeholders that had this passion, this great idea to have a massive 1 acre farm on the corner of Stevens Creek and Winchester Road in Santa Clara, which is a very busy intersection. And it just wasn't exactly appropriate, but the developer couldn't quite say no without having those budget numbers in hand. And to be able to come back to the develop or to the city and say, Farmscape is going to do this on a 1/4 acre. It's going to cost us this much. We can fund it in perpetuity using these programs. And also, it's going to grow X amount of pounds of food annually, which is more than the city thought that you could grow on a 1/4 acre of land per year. So we were able to satisfy all parties during this process by just having 16 years of data on how much these projects grow, how much they cost, and what all of the costs and inputs are going into them. So even though we're farmers, we can do design all the way through to the CD set. And so our landscape architecture team works on projects in all different capacities. When we're looking at really small infill projects, it may not have sense to have make sense for us to do our own drawings for it. And what we'll do is we'll work as consultants to the landscape architect to provide red lines and feedback on, a small vegetable garden area on the property that'll just keep things running smoothly and move us forward into construction. But some projects that are, require master planning or are more agrihood style and have enough acreage for us to do a soil farm, we can do everything from the schematic design all the way through CDs and construction administration. Um, we're also C27 licensed landscape contractors. So we're providing the build on these projects as well. And where the benefit in that comes in is we have a lot of our details already done, our irrigation details and soil details. We build these projects all the time. We build 1 to 2 agrihood projects or farm park projects a year, in addition to, 100 residential projects annually. So there's a lot of knowledge that our team has and doing these on time, on budget, within scope, really swiftly. And for our team that, although we're small, does a lot of affordable housing, we can handle the complicated paperwork that goes along with these as well. Um, we're able to perform all aspects of installation work, so grading, drainage, irrigation, um, hardscape, raised beds, planting, and lighting. And we frequently work on larger sites with GCs or with another landscape construction firm to be able to provide efficiencies for the client. And, maybe on one project, it makes sense for the GC to provide the hardscape all the way through for warranty purposes, um, or, whatever the case may be. Those are things that after building projects like this for as long as we have, we're pretty skilled at knowing where we are going to add efficiency, add value, and where we want to take advantage of our other partners on the project. But here's the thing that Farmscape is really known for, which is maintenance. So our maintenance program is pretty extensive. We started off as a maintenance company. That was our bread and butter from the beginning. And we have, I think this is our 36th or 37th season. We collect data from all of our gardens across the state at the end of every season. And so we're experienced working in a number of different microclimates and recommending the right vegetables, the right varieties, the right quantities and ratios in each location. So even though I'm in Oakland and Dan's in Los Angeles, we have farms in Chino, we have farms in Mission Viejo in the Orange County area, all the way up to, we're doing one in Tracy, California, in the San Joaquin Valley right now. So we're able to compare notes across all these different regions. We're not specialized in just one. And what's cool about our maintenance, and the thing that I think makes it a dream for property owners and developers, is we amortize the cost of this into a monthly package. And so you're not paying at the beginning of every season for a bunch of seeds and starts or a bunch of compost. We know how much it costs to maintain every site per square foot. So we know how much it costs to maintain row crops, raised beds, orchards, pathways, all per square foot. So we can give you a price for that that you can plan for and that your asset managers can plan for in perpetuity. And so our maintenance services include all sorts of fun things, including the seasonal crop selection. That's actually where we're at right now. So in the beginning of March and the beginning of October, we send out our seasonal crop guides to all of our clients. And so at big places like the Oracle Park in San Francisco, um, this goes to our chefs. And at commercial projects, at multifamily projects, it depends on what group of stakeholders it goes to, or if you just want to say farmer's choice, which is we'll give you, what we think the best ratio is. We do planting every March, April, and then every October, November. There's basically two seasons in California for those of you who aren't farmers. And those are really great things that you can get residents involved in. This was one of the things that sold Santa Clara City Council on the agrihood concept was the idea that there could be community involvement in placemaking. And these are events that we coordinate with the city of Santa Clara with set volunteer times that people can come out and work with us during. So there are things that offer people a lot of resources in the community beyond just the people you're helping. So while sometimes there's pushback to affordable housing, uh, because the community doesn't want it for whatever reason, this is a great way to bring the community to your site and see the benefits of it. We also perform all the not so fun for the community stuff, integrated pest management. We're all organic, irrigation management, as well as harvesting, pruning, aesthetics, things like that. And then we take it all out and replant the next season. So does anyone have any questions before I keep blowing through this? And I can't see everybody. I can only see some windows. So
Yeah, I have a question. No one has dropped anything or raised their hand, but how long you said that there was a project in Chino. When was that done or accomplished, or when did you guys start that project? And just to better understand like the length of, how long your farms have been around, or the ones that, the ones that have been around the longest, and what, because I think as we look at from an affordable developers and cities, that what you've been talking about, that maintenance piece, but understanding how that in perpetuity, like what is that, where your farm's at right now in that process, how long and so forth.
well,
Yeah.
let me
Oh, go ahead, Lara.
Oh, I was just going to introduce you, Dan. So Dan is my business partner and our CEO, and works in our Southern California office. And so I'll let you answer about Chino.
Yeah, that's a great project. So it's at the part of the preserve communities over in Chino. It's a market rate site, so not 100% comparable in terms of time frame and process, but it's a site we've been working at for about a decade, mostly in the management capacity, and one of the sites where we're channeling lessons learned into the next round of design. So the nice part is we have projects that we've designed and been engaged with from the beginning, and then we have other projects where we've come on mostly in a maintenance and programming capacity, and then suggested updates and retrofits to the project. And one of the things that's motivated us to get engaged in projects earlier is just seeing things we wish we had been engaged with earlier, and want to see the next developer integrate into their plans right off the bat, so that you don't have to retrofit and you can do kind of thoughtful value engineering beginning at the design phase instead of working backwards once you're underway. But that's a great site. It's and I think we probably have photos of it in a minute, so I won't get too far ahead. But there's apricots, community farm space, cut flower areas. It's a really dynamic growing area, and somewhere it's a good example of somewhere with hot summers that thrives year round with the right selections.
Melanie, what was the second part of your question about the ongoing funding? I
And so
wanted to,
I guess Dan kind of answered it. I was just like, how long has the Chino, he said it's been a
mhm.
process. So just kind of wanted to understand like how long have the farms you've installed or designed or how long have they been around, and so but I see Miguel. I don't want to take a lot of time and I know you still have more slides, but Miguel has his hand raised.
Hi, I'm Miguel Vasquez. I'm with the County of Riverside Department of Public Health. And this is really exciting to see how you operate, and it's great. My questions are related to how to make it happen, starting from a zoning. How do you
Hmm.
go about identifying parcels that actually could have this type of land use? Because in some cases, this may not be allowed, so you may have to do a zone change. And then there's also the aspect, this is the second question related to that, of what type of environmental review you have to go through. So what's the story behind getting the permits to do something like this?
That's a great question, Miguel.
That,
So
that's, that's
I'm going to use the project in front of you as my case study for this. So this is that one that I was talking about that's in Santa Clara, busy intersection across from the mall and the Winchester Mystery House. So it's kind of this centerpiece, center drag through Santa Clara. And I don't believe we needed to do a zoning change because a lot of these things are I think I lucked out in this case and in any case because it was formerly agricultural. This used to be an ag test site for the University of California. And to be clear, we don't we work with developers on the zoning portion of it. We're generally not the people pitching these projects. Um, and so we're working, we see that cities are interested in doing these things where where developers reach out to us, or sometimes the conditions of approval for a project, like the Patterson Ranch community in Fremont, the land was gifted to the city with the caveat the Patterson family wanted was that a portion of it be kept as farmland in perpetuity. And the city didn't quite know what to do with that request. And so they handed it off to the developer of the land to figure out how to incorporate that request into this. So it's different for each and every project. The thing that I think is great about this, though, if anyone's ever had complicated projects that take a long time, this one took 10 years from the first community meeting I went to when we put shovels in the ground, more or less. And Dan and I were with this project the entire way. So what's nice is we'll have the institutional memory of what's going on these things to be able to carry these projects through any complicated zoning um, or issues. And then in terms of an environmental impact, because we're organic, we really don't have a lot of that. Um, the community members who lived in single family homes right around this development had some very common sense questions about dust and about rats. That was the thing they wanted to know about. But we handle those elements as farmers all the time and have a protocol for dealing with them. And so a lot of my work in with building review and city council early on is reassuring them that this is going to be well maintained, that we're thinking about things like runoff. We're using all organic products, so any runoff isn't contaminating water systems. These aren't like the farms of yore that are heavy polluters or anything like that. These are value adds to the ecosystem instead of detractors for the pollinators and for all the residents living around them.
Thank you. Excellent answers. I just wanted to perhaps offer an idea.
Please.
Maybe you may be familiar with the City of Riverside's Grow Conference. I think they have it every year. I think this is something that maybe you have already presented there, but I think it would be of interest to the people attending that conference, which focuses on food systems. But thank you for your
Miguel, I
time.
love that. We've attended that conference, but it's been a few years, and that's a great idea. Thank you.
Well, Miguel had me go through some kind of fun questions about this core agrihood project, which um, uh, we did the most on and had the longest relationship with. So I like to use it as a case study to explain how we work with projects through design, installation, and maintenance. So I've already gone into the design a little bit about how we right-sized it, budget before we put pens to paper and blew a lot of developer money designing farms that would not be affordable to maintain. And so you can see from this aerial basically what the farm ended up being. And this baby grows a lot of food. It's pretty cool. And so um, one of the things that's really neat about it is, and I'm going to try and maybe fail to use this annotation thing that's on the bottom of it. Let's see if I can make it work. Okay, it's too complicated. I'm not going to do that. So we use all rainwater catchment to irrigate the farm. And that's something that I didn't think would ever happen on an affordable project, but was really, really cool. So that water tower that's in the foreground is all rainwater catchment from the hardscape. And so we have a whole water purification system that cleans the runoff in a couple different ways in the shed that's in the lower left-hand side of this. And then, refilters it out to our drip irrigation system. Um, Another cool design element was we focused on a lot of things that those neighbors there's single family homes directly across the street from this. So we have a lot of varieties in the farm that are things those folks specifically want. So it definitely is not, even for people who support affordable housing, it's not fun to have a multi-year construction project going on across from your house. So we try to soften the blow with tomatoes and peppers that these people prefer and make sure that they get them in hand. It's kind of hard to be angry at that point. And we also wanted to use a bunch of, you can't see it from this photo because they're babies, but all along the fence around the farm are espaliered fruit trees. And espaliers are when you grow the trees flat against a fence instead of, in tree form. And many of those relate to historical elements of Santa Clara and of that site. So we were able to tie a lot of cool things into that, as well as food selections that people in the affordable senior building that's adjacent to this wanted to eat. We have a high Asian American population that wanted a lot of Asian vegetables grown in the garden, in addition to a Vietnamese coffee house that wanted some special elements grown. So that's pretty cool that we get to enjoy all that in the farm. Oops. This is what it looked like when we were under construction on it, and you can see the senior affordable building in the back as well as the shed when it was just happening. The construction of farms is very swift. Um, the main delay is coordination with other vendors, as is usually the case. As you're layering on different phases of work. But most of them take between 1 and 2 months to build. And then we start maintenance right away. Other than, the dead of winter or August, September, we can usually get plants in the ground right away. And we started farming with our seniors on site immediately. Um, and these were relationships that had been built during the installation phase because we were there every day and people were stopping by and asking us what's going on. So by the time we finally opened, we had a built-in community. What's cool about this site too is it's also the bus stop is on the corner of it. And so we get a lot of people who don't live in this community volunteering and hanging out as well. Um, here's a pro. Oh, so here's another affordable project that we wanted to feature for y'all. And so this is another Northern California one, but it's one that could be replicated anywhere. It's called the Colma Veterans Village. It's a Mercy housing project. And this one has a totally different model. So whereas the one before, we've worked out the budget that we're going to be there maintaining this farm in perpetuity. At this one, we designed it for us to be fired as the maintenance providers after a year. And that was on purpose because these are veterans who are moving into this development. They really don't need us to they really don't need us to do, the fruit tree maintenance for them long term. So we trained the folks there. They got the hang of it. We worked with Brilliant Corners and supportive services on site to get this all set up. And then they've been taking care of it and actually adding to the site from there. So we worked as a sub to Jet Landscape Architecture and Design on this project. And we really like doing veterans projects. They're totally the right population for this type of work, I think. They're like, many of them love getting their hands dirty and assisting. So I think it's a great idea for veterans projects. And, we just have a few minutes left. So there's one other Southern California one that I wanted to show. And while this one is a market rate one, I just think it's fabulous. And I, wanted to showcase this one as something that could be done in the Inland Empire because you have the space to do it. So this is in Rancho Mission Viejo. And for affordable housing, you don't need to do the prop tractor out front or anything like that. You could still make it just as fantastic because the benefit of it is what you can grow in Southern California. It's just such a
Really?
special environment for food production.
Come in here.
Well, and Lara, can I just add one of the neat things
Mhm.
is about how this site is located. So with the core project in Santa Clara, you shared a lot about some of the stacking that's taking place.
Mhm.
This farm is also about a quarter acre. They have a couple other farms there, but this is the best attended farm in terms of maintenance and the programming that we conduct. And it's because of where it's located. So it's right in the center of their downtown village. It's next door to the coffee shop. We're able to host farmers markets so that people can pick up farm boxes and their coffee. It's across the street from the school for field trips and just also passive enjoyment as people are going about their days. So something we care about a lot is these spaces are functional, productive, participatory, but they're also meant to be front of house. So we have fruit trees ringing the perimeter of the farm that provide kind of a beautiful year-round look. Even the dormant stone fruit kind of have a beautiful form to them. And then the interior of the farm where all of our annuals are grown is kind of the bulk of the production and programming space. But again, because it was planned right off the bat, we have cold storage and event space right next door to the farm. So you can have working programming, but we can also have culinary programming kind of using that adjacent kitchen and patio space that they planned as part of the space.
Yeah, and we have a bunch. Oh, someone just asked for our contact info. We'll certainly put it in the chat. We have it over here as well. But we have just about a minute or two left, so probably time for one question. If anyone has any questions about any of the sites we showed or groovy. Well, thank you so much for your time. We're really glad to be able to present to you about this. And we'll get the information in the chat for you. And thanks again.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you guys for sharing out with us. We greatly appreciate that. And so I just, I was excited to have Laura and Dan to meet them at Housing California, just because I see the connection to a lot of our spaces, especially since, you know, the idea is to come into the process in the very beginning in that planning process. So we don't add any cost to it. And then when we, to the projects and when we do landscape, when we do plan, we could just be very intentional with it, right? Leveraging what we have. And I know, we have folks in Lift to Rise, and I know there's a strong movement out there in the Coachella Valley, especially with a lot of farm workers, to see if there's elements of building out community, gardens, farmscapes, in that space too, in housing. So thank you guys for sharing. I truly appreciate it. And their information is here. And so we're going to pivot to our next presenter. I have Dawn Smith, who is here. Dawn, I can make you a presenter so it's easier to share your slides. But before I let Dawn get started and let him get set up, I just kind of wanted to set the platform. So I asked Dawn, everyone knows Dawn. He's been in the housing space, especially in the IE, for a while. But I specifically asked Dawn to come share as probably one of our more experienced housers in shared housing to come out and share to us about what this is, what it means, and just some of the opportunities in different groups around the area, especially with some of our faith partners that are part of collective, and just different subregions of the area. There's been discussions on how can we use, standing up a shared housing model, or there's some, existing ones to help get folks housed, more quickly, as we see just the political climate and just the appetite for building affordable housing become much more challenging, as it was challenging in the year past and just even more challenging ahead. I think that shared housing might present opportunities to house folks more quickly with, what resources, what housing we have available in a strategic way. So there are some benefits. And so just, I wanted Dawn to come share out with us, help us better understand the different models and what shared housing is, to, help encourage and to kind of grow some of these conversations we're having within the collective. So Dawn, if you don't mind, go ahead and you could share out. Yeah, you should have presenter rights. So thank you, Dawn. Go ahead and get started.
Okay, so everyone can see that.
We can see it. You're good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Melanie, for the opportunity. Melanie and I just discussed this a couple of days ago, so I didn't really have an opportunity to prepare anything specific for this group, although I put the title slide on the right organization and name. So I'm going to be dancing through a hodgepodge of slides from various sources that I've been connected with over the years, and hopefully just introduce the conversation with plans for much deeper discussion and more educational approach around it in the future, for sure. So as Melanie said, affordable housing development as we know it has slowed. And frankly, I've been working in this space for almost 30 years. And I have to say, maybe there was a brief period of hope in the last decade, but right now I'm in a place where I don't see any movement toward actually addressing our affordable housing crisis. And what we call even affordable housing development is not consumer focused, it's developer focused. How do we make it pencil out for developers? Not how do we make it affordable for consumers? And we're just not going in any direction that's going to address the continuing growing housing crisis, affordable housing crisis, well, housing crisis in general. And so shared housing is a space that I've been dabbling in for 5 or 6 years. There's a couple of other people here who I've worked with in the shared housing space. Amanda Tower was instrumental in getting the Housing Authority in San Bernardino on board with supporting shared housing. Sharon Green has been doing shared housing for a number of years. And there's several people here who are now participating in a 8-month-long shared housing certificate training series, which hopefully is going to develop the expertise and knowledge on this concept. So anyway, when we talk about shared housing, and in this context, we're talking about shared housing as permanent housing. In fact, when we go back to the title slide, embracing shared housing as a permanent housing solution. So it's important to distinguish from shared temporary space, which is often program driven and targeted to addressing a short-term need. But what we're talking about here is using shared housing, and that can be anywhere from 2 people sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, 2 people sharing a larger multi-bedroom space, and other concepts around to share space more efficiently and effectively and affordably, most importantly, is what we're talking about. But shared housing is for all of us. 39% of households in the US live in some form of shared housing right now. I found this second one interesting. 75% of people under 65, not living with a spouse, reside in shared housing. I'm not sure where they pulled that stat, but that's that really highlights the notion that it's not some anomaly. It's not something uh, you know, outlandish that we're forcing people into. It's really how most of us live for most of our lives. We've shared space with other people. It's a norm, and it's across income spectrums. Shared housing happens in all kinds of spaces, in trendy New York and San Francisco units where young urban professionals, 14 to 16 deep, share a space, to the Golden Girls model, which following the lead of Rose and the rest of them in simply older adults pooling their income to share a space. And so and co-op living has always been something that we've dabbled in. We don't really talk about it. In fact, I prefer to refer to what we're talking about here as cooperative living or cooperative housing as opposed to shared housing, because there's such a negative connotation around the notion of shared in America. But anyway, so it's not some anomaly. And these stats are a little old, going back to 2018, but it still makes the point. You can see across metropolitan regions, there's a large percentage of the adult population lives in shared housing space. And I'm sure those numbers are probably higher today than they were almost 10 years ago. And big reason for it is we're going in the wrong direction. Housing is becoming less and less attainable for too many folks, particularly at the extremely low income level. But that trickles up in this case as housing just keeps getting more affordable. Then at other income levels, affordable housing becomes out of reach. And so these are the latest, fresh off the GAP report, which was just released last week, or was it this week? Recently. Annually, the National Low Income Housing Coalition releases a GAP report. These are stats from California. You can see extremely low income households, over 80%. Live severely cost burden meaning they pay more than 50% of their income on housing cost. And you see that the numbers just keep climbing at each income level. These are the numbers for our region. You can see Riverside, San Bernardino metropolitan region. Currently, we have 23 affordable units for every 100 low-income renters. We used to be in the top 5 in the nation. Now we're closer to 7 or 8 in that stat. LA actually passed us. We used to be ahead of LA. Now they've passed us for having too few affordable rental units for low-income households. And I don't know if I have a stat on this, but some people think that we've got this system that takes care of affordable housing, but here in the Riverside, Ontario metropolitan region, HUD-assisted housing represents 6% of the rental housing stock, 6% of the rental housing stock. And nationwide, less than 24% of people who qualify for some type of housing subsidy actually obtain one. And when we're talking about extremely low income households or households that are severely cost burdened in their housing, here over a third are in the labor force, and almost half of those are full-time employees who struggle with being able to afford housing. But the big concern over here is more than half of extremely low-income households are seniors and people with disabilities. So people who aren't going to have a big income increase coming anytime soon. Yet, and Social Security got a 2.5% income bump this last year, but most rentals in California were able to bump rent to almost 10% increase. And at that pace, there's no way to keep up. Since 2000, we've seen rents increase in California at over 35%, while income has increased at about 7%. And so that's just not a metric that's going to eventually catch up. Another example of seniors and disabled. In California, there is no zip code in California where someone living on Social Security can afford to comfortably rent. And actually in the nation, these are the California numbers, but nationwide, there's no zip code in the country where someone living on a Social Security income can comfortably afford a rental without some type of assistance or subsidy. And it's going in the wrong direction. And it's not just folks in that situation. There's a great essay. I urge everybody to get a hold of this. America is pushing its workers into homelessness. This essay really outlines the problem that a lot of us have been waving the flag on for decades, because we have this way of defining homelessness, which really narrows who gets counted in that, but leaves out a whole bunch of folks who don't get counted in that, but for all intents and purposes are homeless or insecurely housed, living in their cars, paying for a motel for 2 weeks and then on the streets for 2 weeks, crashing with friends, etc. And that trend is only growing, and it's growing fastest in areas where the economy is growing the best. Ironically, as the economy grows in metropolitan regions, they get higher level housing, but incomes don't keep up with that, and so the housing stock, the affordable housing stock, continues to dwindle in that situation. And there's a great report out, the deteriorating rental affordability, which everybody should get a hold of and look at the trends, which include, these are fully employed workers, and how many of them are cost burden or severely cost burden renters. In industries you'd be surprised, look at the construction industry, but personal care and services, of course, social service industry, which many of us are in. There's a whole lot of fully employed working folks who struggle to be able to make monthly rent, or that proverbial one paycheck away from being unable to afford housing. So 5 truths that I want to make sure we got out on shared housing and why it's something that we need to systematically approach to help make a bigger part of our systems of addressing homelessness and housing insecurity. First, that shared housing is not a lesser option. As I mentioned earlier, shared housing is something that we all live in at some point in our lives. For many of us, for the majority of our lives, we share housing with people. So when we're putting that option on the table, it's not asking people to accept something lesser. It's a norm. And so we need to highlight that and make it more acceptable to folks who we're trying to pitch this option to as a norm, and not just something we're forcing people to accept as a lesser option. Shared housing is flexible. There's no singular approach to offering shared housing. And we need to explore all options available on creating more space that makes it more affordable for people to live. And that includes sharing space to make it work. It's totally worth it financially for people experiencing homelessness and for the homeless system. People living in shared space costs them less for housing and other expenses in their life, expenses they're able to share with others. And for the homeless system, if you've got a 4-bedroom house, you're pulling 4 people off the street instead of 1 person into an apartment that's going to cost you $650,000 to develop 1 unit. So it's economies of scale there. And it can maximize quality of life. Again, it's not a lesser option. People sharing space have more opportunity to develop relationships, a sense of belonging, a neighborhood connection. It improves quality of life when we're sharing space with others. And it doesn't have to be forever. As we're pitching shared housing options, and people who come in thinking of it as a lesser option can certainly work their way out to their own space from this type of space. So those are 5 key truths from the National Alliance to End Homelessness on shared housing. So what is shared housing? 2 or more people sharing housing. Each person has their own room with shared common areas. And one thing that I keep pushing for folks, that we're talking about housemates, not roommates. Often when you talk about shared housing, people think of roommates. They think of those stories where you got a 10 by 10 with 2 or more grown adults, unrelated, unconnected, don't know each other, are spending $1,000 each to share a 10 by 10. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about dignified housing. People have their own private rooms and share common areas. So the housemates, not roommates. Shared housing is not a program. It's any situation in which an agreement formalizes the co-residence of 2 or more family or household units within the same housing unit. So it's a type of housing. It's a normal way for most of us to live. Kind of went over this. Shared housing maximizes access to housing options for preventing and ending homelessness. When we're talking about permanent housing, it's 2 or more unrelated tenants have their own room and share common space. Each tenant often has their own lease with the landlord, but that's often a nuance that's tied to a funding program that's requiring that. It doesn't have to be that situation, but they do come in their own situation. So, for example, if one person leaves or isn't paying their rent, it doesn't create a new burden for the other residents, because that unit is dealt with in a separate situation. And each housemate may stay or leave at any time based on their rental agreement in that space. So I just did that one. And so why? We've already talked about it. The severe housing shortage, the growth of people experiencing homelessness is way more than that. If you add the people who don't get counted, who aren't counted in the current definition, people at extremely low incomes are paying more than half of their income. And in some cases, over 80% of their income goes toward housing costs. And then there's no room left for anything else. And our approach to provide subsidized housing is sorely underfunded. Only 1 in 4 households that would qualify for some type of housing subsidy assistance actually get it nationwide. I'm assuming in California it's a lot worse. Here in our region, the housing authority waiting list for both counties combined is typically over 200 people. All these points were kind of made. So from a system perspective, it extends the capacity of the system to move more people out of homelessness sooner, especially in a tight housing market like ours. It allows greater throughput in our programs by utilizing existing housing stock and housing more than one person at a time, and not waiting for that golden ticket voucher or that great new development that's been coming for the last 10 years. And from a personal perspective, it expands housing options and increases social connectivity, reduces social isolation for people who go into these spaces. Melanie, tell me when I'm have 2-3 minutes left.
We're at you. Yeah, you're good. We're probably have like 7 minutes left. So if there are folks that have questions specifically, but I think also what might be helpful, Don, to lean in and kind of the remaining time is the different types of models too of shared housing.
Yes.
Like how is that stood
Yeah.
up? Because it's much more. I've learned a lot about that and how it can be stood up and supported in our community.
Absolutely. And there's tons of models out there, anywhere from working with landlords who either they rent each room themselves and manage the property, or they master lease to an organization, a nonprofit, or another organization that then is responsible for the rent. That's key in a master leasing situation. So whether you have those rooms full or not, you're committing to paying that monthly rent, and that's key for getting landlords on board. But also for landlords, when an organization has made a commitment to the house, they're put at ease, much greater ease in working with an organization who's going to manage the people in the house rather than them taking a chance on doing that. But there's apartment sharing, 2-bedroom apartments. US Vets has one of the best programs in the country with shared housing that's COC funded that they do here in San Bernardino. I don't know if they have Riverside units too under that program. There's also home sharing, where people rent out rooms in their space through a coordinated process. So it's not people taking a gamble. You've got systems in place for the protection and security of both parties and to match people up. So people who may have a lot of space, older adults who might need some help around the house and can rent to someone to help with them and those types of situations. Let's see what else. Almost all of the models now are supported by federal funding sources and state funding sources. The state has really jumped on the shared housing model, and there's a particular organization, Bay Area Community Services, that has steamrolled their way into that. Let's see, did I cover all of these? Affordable housing available on rooms for rent, service trade. Yeah, okay. There are organizations all over the country that have taken on the mantle of doing shared housing. Local group that we're familiar with, Illumination Foundation, has successfully used COC and state funding to implement a shared housing model specifically targeted to chronically homeless adults. Path LA is doing that as well. There's the Share Collaborative in LA, which almost never gets talked about. They've been doing it for a couple of decades, and they have over 150 properties in their network where people pay no more than $500 to rent a room in that space. And then Bay Area Community Services is way ahead of what you're seeing here. They've really taken this in a whole new level. I've got some stuff from them on here, just real quick. Oh, I didn't know it had flashing things. So Bay Area Community Services has taken the model and really run with it. They were the first. Well, they had already purchased some homes back in the 80s and had a few homes where they were doing sometimes transitional housing, but also permanent housing. But during COVID, and in the first round of Home Key, they got money through Home Key to purchase 20 homes in Oakland to pull hundreds of people off the streets into shared housing space. So one of the best ways to make this work is through nonprofits owning housing. And they've worked the model in a way, they've used that state funding. They've also taken out loans to purchase housing with a hefty down payment on it, and they've already paid those off. They now have 62 homes in their inventory that they own and operate. And because they own and operate it debt-free, they can charge whatever they want. They charge $500 a month. And obviously they built a budget and a model around working with that type of income, but they're not even trying to have to reach a $3,000 or $3,500 rent for a 4-bedroom home. They can charge whatever they want because they own the properties. So that is the best way. If we get more organizations, I think yesterday, Melanie and I were both in a shared housing training yesterday where they put it out there. If every nonprofit just bought one home, just think of how many people we could get off the streets if we all had a home where we could get people housed. So there's plenty more to go through, but I can stop there and take questions and come back to any slides that might answer a question if something that I skipped. Miguel?
Yes, this is an amazing presentation, Don. I didn't know about your program, and I think it has quite a bit of potential to address where people can live. A few years ago, I was thinking when Airbnb was kind of starting out, and I thought, this technology could really be a big player in addressing the issues. However, as we can see, I think actually Airbnbs are exacerbating the problem of, not having places for people to rent or buy, and they're growing. So
Yes.
I wonder, so two things. One, I wonder if in your spaces there are conversations around using technology to connect people with, you know, uh, landlords with people in need. And the second one, if you are advocating for, I don't know what to call it, but I'm just going to use the word maybe restrictions on Airbnbs so that people can, have an opportunity to buy or rent. So what are your
Mhm.
thoughts, Don?
Well, Airbnbs are taking units off the market, which just increases the cost of housing as rental units continue to get pulled off the market through Airbnbs. But the concept of using technology to match folks is definitely one that needs to be heightened within our space. In Maricopa County in Arizona, they have this great program. I can't remember the name of the group, but they have this whole technological system set up to match people to available affordable housing units within the homeless and low income service space. And Riverside is currently exploring doing that as well. I know they're contracting, I can't remember the group they're contracting with, but Riverside COC is looking to technologize their affordable housing inventory for working in the homeless and housing insecure space. So hopefully we'll see more of that. Joel.
Thank you, Don. So I'm curious because I think I definitely see the potential with this model, but I know that the first question and concern that we get from presenting this to anyone that I'd be speaking with would be, who am I going to be matched up with? Like, who am I sharing this space with? How do I know we can trust them? Are they vetted? Is there some sort of liability that is being done? Do you know how some of the agencies that have been doing this sort of program have managed those concerns?
Yes, and that's a big part of the National Shared Housing Institute. It's been around for about 7 or 8 years. They're the ones who are really advancing this model, doing the trainings. They have a whole section on housemate matching and multiple approaches to doing that, and that definitely works great when you have an inventory for choices. And so that just highlights the need to create a whole inventory, not just piecemeal one and two do it, because it's a lot tougher. If you have one 4-bedroom house and you have a list coming off your CES of people at the top, you can't simply just pick and choose and something like that. So having an inventory is key to being able to match roommates up. But everybody who does this has their own methods. The Bay Area Community Service group that we just talked about, they have a whole instrument on evaluating folks. I hate the term housing readiness, but just to evaluate their housing skill sets and to try to connect people in the right environment, and also be prepared to address situations where there's potential clashes in environments, and being able to transition folks in a positive and constructive way, not through eviction and stuff like that. So there are lots of approaches out there to addressing how to match the right people with the right spaces. And then, of course, if you have an environment that has permanent supportive housing component, or even now ECM, enhanced care management component around it, then and creates more of a situation where you can bring in folks who may have more challenges in living on their own, but have a strong enough support structure to make it work. And then more than anything, there's always a housemate agreement in these spaces. And the ones that are run well, the housemates meet once a week to go over things, to discuss things, to make adjustments to their housemate agreement, to share concerns and those kind of things. So when that's done right, it also helps address the mixing of folks in these spaces. Curtis.
Thanks for the presentation, Don. You actually just touched on my question was going to be permanent supportive housing services, how those are incorporated. Is it kind of like I don't know, kind of like the recovery house model where they've got these spaces and then they could have services come to them or take them to some type of supportive housing center, just to do all those recovery aspects, to get everybody back on track and economic development. So this is a really great model, and I think it's something I've heard of in passing as we're exploring our homelessness strategy. But not just for homelessness. Before we were looking at it more for seniors, like I saw Yaku posted the AB 474 information. But yeah, particularly with the homelessness strategy, I think this could be a good bang for your buck type of situation.
Absolutely. And really, this model really started getting developed in the permanent housing space. The early organizations that were doing this first, particularly on the East Coast, were doing it in the permanent supportive housing space. Pathways to Housing, Sam Simbaris's group is a good example of that. But in Connecticut and Virginia, there are organizations that have real strong PSH components. Illumination Foundation here locally is focused on PSH. So there can definitely be a good, strong, intentional approach for PSH in this space with strong support components. But really what I've found and others have found in doing this is you really have to have some support component, whether they need that permanent supportive housing case management mode or not. To make these environments work, having community connection and having someone who is making those connections when people are having issues or having challenges or having questions or just need some help with something, to have someone to turn to who can make those connections smoothly and effectively to help people address challenges before they become big challenges and keep people on their toes. If someone's in the house who is involved in a behavioral health plan that involves taking meds or going to therapy sessions and things like that. You can build that in through ECM or some other support. If you're an organization that takes on these houses, you just make that commitment to be that support. It's not a live-in. It's not a full-time case manager assigned, unless you can afford to do that, even better. But just having somebody who's a resource person for this space and can kind of be there to work with people living in the house as they go through this whole thing. Other questions? Or I can't see what's in the chat. Is there a question or comment in the chat that somebody just wants to say out loud? Ayako?
Hi, Don. Ayako Sumi here with Mary Erickson Community Housing. Thank you for a great presentation, and thank you for bringing this to us. I did, as Curtis had mentioned, I did put in the chat AB 474 by Assemblymember Ward from San Diego is trying to change some laws and some policies to enable it to work better for seniors, which is a slightly different model than kind of what you've mostly been discussing around permanent supportive housing. But please do encourage your local assembly members to vote for this. It's a very important step forward. We won't get much further if we don't have the policy to protect both the home provider and the renter. So please do look at that. we're running out of time, but anyway, amazing job. Oh, and just so you know, the state of California, the Department of Aging is looking at shared housing and very interested in helping to facilitate some capacity building throughout the state, because shared housing is also a very powerful tool for rural areas. They're just not going to have a lot of housing built. So shared housing is great for rural areas. So it's a great tool. We need to expand it, and let's continue to have this discussion. And I'll keep you posted too as I hear more from what Department of Aging says. Thank you.
Yeah,
Great topic.
that's definitely great news. The Department of Aging has definitely stepped more into this space. And I actually am working with a couple organizations that have secured some funding to actually do some shared housing models for older adults. So I'm looking forward to bringing those online soon. But it is, again, a direction that a lot of people are looking more closely at, and the state has become more and more supportive. In fact, they had a special carve out in the last home key round for shared housing pilots. So it is something that's growing nationwide, but definitely here in California. Sharon.
Don Smith, it's so good to see you, young man.
You too.
What you mentioned that I do shared housing, but your PowerPoint, would you be willing to share that?
Of course. Of course.
Okay.
You've seen most of the slides I have, but yeah, I got some new stuff to definitely share with you. But absolutely.
Okay, let's do that. Let's talk about that.
And
let's
just
get in contact.
Definitely, really quick, if I can, Melanie, a slide I wanted to hit. It's not just about single family homes or even apartments. We can look at how we do new developments in a way that creates shared cooperative living space. This is a perfect example. Some of you are familiar with this example from LifeArc. They have a space in El Monte, and I know they're looking at other spaces, but this is where they actually develop property that has micro units for living space and then a centralized common area. So we can even start looking at developments and how we can build developments faster and maybe less expensively by looking at creative ways that includes cooperative living space.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Don, so much for sharing. I know that we could probably extend this another 30 minutes and maybe get through 70% of your presentation on it. So I know that there's a lot of information and just aspects of it to share out on. And so, if folks are...
Yeah, I just add one quick little comment.
Sure.
And just to tag on to something that Don touched on earlier is that shared housing programs really should be managed and operated by nonprofits. We don't want the for-profit groups to try to get in here saying, oh gosh, I can make a lot of money if I do this. No. This must be a nonprofit initiative, because we have to keep mission and the residents and the home providers really central. This is not for people to create a business.
Absolutely. I have to comment on that really quickly, because when we did a shared housing pilot in 2019, we had some state funding to work on that. And we set up 5 new houses. But then the landlords that we worked with were catching on. And in their minds, if you're going to have 4 different people in my house, and I can charge you more than if I was charging just a family who was renting that house. So they were already thinking, how can I make more money off of doing this model? That's why it's so critical that we have nonprofits who are managing these spaces under the master leasing, or owning these properties, or working with investors who are committed to the objective of creating affordable space for the people who are living there.
Well, thank you, Don, again. And I know we have a lot of just experts or just folks that are knowledgeable in the space just here in the meeting today. So I recognize that, and I appreciate everyone's input and thoughtfulness. And this is something that we'll be talking about throughout the year as a handful of folks are involved in the Shared Housing Institute. And if this is something that there's opportunity in our region to pursue or to rally behind a couple nonprofits to support this work, either new ones or existing ones, I think there's some space for the collective to lean in. So we'll be continuing this. If there's some interest in following that or being a part of that conversation, just let me know so I can make sure to include you when those conversations or groups and do happen. So, and then so for this later half of the meeting, we want to really turn this towards our pillars, our working pillars, to provide an update on what's happening, anything we want to amplify level up to the larger group. We can do so here in this space and have a quick shout. If there's time, we will allow, folks, members to just do a quick shout out if they'd like on this. But if you want to jump in, Ayako, if you want to lead out with expansion of housing solutions pillar, maybe we'll do like 2-3 minutes each pillar.
Great, thank you. Ayako here again, expansion of housing solutions. We meet the second Thursday of every month from 9 to 10 a.m. Second Thursday of the month. We talk about just expanding housing solutions, whether that be what Don had mentioned, this live bark plastic housing, up to any other types of innovative and factory built housing. And then we also look at homeless housing as well as middle income housing and home ownership. So the full gamut, that's what we focus on. Please join us. Please reach out to Mel or me and we'll get you on the list. So second Thursday of each month, 9 to 10. One of the focus that we were thinking for this year was just take a closer look at middle housing. And that is not a detached single family and not a big multifamily. So it's everything in between. Because that's another affordable housing solution tool that we should learn more about and learn more how to encourage such production throughout our region. And as you know, most of you know, we have an annual networking event where we all get together. We have little topical breakouts. We network, we get to know one another, really strengthen our bonds together as advocates for affordable housing. One topic we thought we would have for this year could be how to expand middle housing. And we wanted to know, ask you all, what is that an interesting topic for you? If that was our topic, would you come? What kind of specific questions or areas of concern might you have? And if you knew of any really amazing speakers who could speak to developing and expanding middle housing, we'd love to get your input today. We will take that back to our expansion of housing solutions committee, review that, and then come up with a more detailed plan. So I wanted to open that up to anyone to make any suggestions, solutions. Is middle income housing an interesting topic for you? Anyone? Okay, who? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Okay. Is there? Do you have any specific questions about middle income housing that you would like addressed, or the people that you would like to see there? Anyone?
Hey, Ayako. So I'm attending in 2 weeks the U.S. Housing and Community Development Conference, and they have a session on missing middle. So let me get some information and maybe the speaker's information. I can pass it along to you.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate that.
Sure thing.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? Any specific topics about middle income housing or not middle income, middle housing?
I have a comment, and maybe you've already addressed them before, but there is a project by Opticos, the people who are promoting missing middle housing in Arizona. It would be kind of cool to do a site visit there. I think it's called Courtyard or something of that sort.
In Arizona?
Yeah, it's they
I'm
just
sorry.
opened up within
Called
the past
what?
year.
What again?
Oh, the developer is Opticos. this time.
Opticus.
Yeah, it's by Dan, what's his last name? He's the main proponent of missing middle housing. I'll find the link and I'll put it in the chat for you.
Thank you, Miguel. Appreciate that. Wonderful.
Of
Thank you.
course.
Anyone else? Any topics or potential speakers that you think might be a real draw for us?
I have an idea that I wanted to, an idea I came across or that we might is to invite a few folks. But I don't know if this is the, I don't know if people want this, but there's like there's panelist housers that kind of fill in. They could do middle housing. There's manufactured. There's some like innovative types, and so I was thinking of, we can invite a handful of folks that were interested in different types of housing to come and maybe do like a quick like 5-minute presentation for different kinds and just kind of share out. And so we could just kind of see, and most of them are, in our surrounding area, maybe not in the IE, but LA or, mostly in LA, or maybe Arizona if someone wants to come out, but to see if they want to come and do like a quick 5-minute presentation on, hey, this is a cool innovation model. This is a couple examples of projects that we've done that have been middle housing type, just to kind of look at the innovation around us and, and kind of invite them into our space in the IE too, to make connections.
Great idea, Mel. Yeah, I think looking at manufacturers is always interesting. Okay, I'm seeing some head nods on that. Great. So we can easily fill up an hour and a half, 2 hours with that. Okay, great. Anyone else have anything to add? If not middle income, middle housing is an interesting topic for us to use for our networking event. And of course, if you're not interested in middle housing, please come anyway, because everyone will be there. So we'll have time for non-middle housing discussion as well. So please don't let that stop you. Great.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Great
one more
ideas.
thing.
Appreciate it. Oh, yes.
If you want to also partner with the Inland Empire section of the American Planning Association, I can make that happen to organize a webinar and find good speakers that can speak on different aspects of the topic. So just let me know. I'll put my email in the chat too.
Oh, thank you. Miguel, you're just a wealth of information. Amazing. Thank you.
That's what I'm here for, to share it.
Yeah.
But there's no use if I just don't say anything.
You said you were with Department
I'm
of
with the
Public Health
County Department of Public Health,
for
with the
Riverside.
Riverside University Health System, Public Health.
Got it. Got it. Okay, fantastic. I'm a public health person too, so.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. All right.
I got you now.
Good to see public health people on housing calls.
That's right.
All right. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I want to turn it back over to Mel because we've got some more speakers. And please do reach out to Mel or me separately if you have a epiphany in the middle of the night. It's not too late. Please reach out to us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ayako. And so I'll give an update for the public policy pillar. Since we aren't able to have the chairs on this month's call, we're going to be working on, we've set a policy tracker on some legislation that we're following, that we're tracking. And so I will add ABA 474, Ayako, that you dropped in there. And so this coming month, we're going to evaluate 3 new pieces of legislation. Last week, we went through the bonds, the 2 different bonds to approve that. So that's something that we are supporting. And this coming meeting, we're looking at how we prioritize it and how do we support it. So does it include meeting with local electeds? Does it include a group like NASCAR letter, or does it include like a letter template that individuals can send to their elected officials, demonstrating support for these policies? So we're going to look at 3 more that we want to follow. We're also going to include a federal update too. in this portion of the meeting just a little bit, and we're going to also reflect on some of the learnings of our Housing California visit, of our visit in Sacramento, as well as talk about a few virtual visits we have scheduled with some of our elected officials. We've already, I think, accomplished about 6 or 7 this far in the year, thanks to the support of some of our interns from CBU that are on this call too. So we're definitely very appreciative of their support in helping making those meetings possible. But we do have another probably 4 or 5 on the docket that we want to include and look if people have available if they want to join. So we'll be talking about all those good things in our policy meeting April 1st. And then I'll leave Jay. Jay, I need 3 more minutes after. So Jay, if you want to do a quick plug, is Jay on here? There you are. Yeah. For Bank On, please do that. So if you want to go off mute and take a minute to talk about Bank On.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. Yeah, a lot of people have already signed up for our Thursday, April 10 in-person event that's coming up in the Riverside area, in the CAPS Riverside, and the information is in the chat there. If you want invitation to register, just email me and we will get that. We had a slight shift with some of the changes at the federal government level as far as sponsorship and what have you, but we're still moving ahead and going to have a great meeting already. I think over 80 are now either registered or have responded to the save the date. And so we're filling up very quickly, but definitely we want to make sure there's room for everybody and a great chance to network. And we'll be focusing on the reentry community as well as our youth community. And just at a reentry event this morning in San Bernardino, there is a 74-year-old woman who is just 4 months out of a 37-year time in her incarceration, and she's looking for work. And so they're working on that. And the family assistance program up in Victorville just purchased 2 new homes, talking about shared housing and what have you. And they have some new properties that they brought on board there. But a lot of great things and a lot of opportunities for many of you to participate in these types of programs. So we'll look forward to seeing you there. And we'll have our wealth pillar as well a few days earlier, the second Tuesday at 10.
Also, so yeah, we'd love to see you guys out at the Bank On Forum if possible. Historically, FDIC, our local rep, Kathy Cho, has been able to support that. But with federal regulations and no travel policy put into place, she could no longer attend or sponsor the event. So Jessica Correa from the Federal Reserve of San Francisco another regulator was able to pick it up and continue. So that's why the link, if you have registered, we have your registration. We're just in the transfer process. And so the Federal Reserve of San Francisco will be sending us the link shortly, and we'll put that out. I'll actually send out a separate newsletter for that since they weren't able to get it to us today. And then, so that leaves us with just 2 minutes for a quick update or quick shout outs if anyone has anything to share. I wanted to just open this up to just the general group. All right. Well, if there isn't anything else, I appreciate both our speakers, Dawn, for coming and sharing about shared housing, and Lara and Dan coming here to share about the great work at Farmscape. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to some continued conversation and learning with you all. Take care. See you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us, y'all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.